one, and that's LR 129. Is this on TV? Because that's the wrong card up there. That's Senator Wishart's interim study to review staffing at the Department of Correctional Services. If you intend to testify today, we will have you fill out a yellow testifier sheet when you come up to testify. Please share that sheet with Lori Wishart, our committee clerk. When you testify, please begin your testimony by giving us your first and last name and spell them for the record. We will be using a 5-minute light system unless a lot more people show up. When the light turns green, you'll have a green light for 4 minutes. It'll be yellow for 1 minute. When it turns red, we'll ask you to wrap up your final thoughts and stop. As a matter of committee policy, we'd like to remind everyone the use of cell phones is not allowed during public hearings. And I'd also ask you to make sure yours is in the silent mode. Assisting the committee are Lori Wishart, our committee clerk, and Neil Erickson, one of our 2 legal counsel. And with that, we'll have the other senators introduce themselves, and then we will allow Senator Wishart to open on her LR 129.
Hi, I'm Senator Patty Pansing Brooks, representing District 28 right here in the heart of Lincoln, and I'm Vice Chair of Judiciary.
I'm Suzanne Geist. I represent District 25, which is the southeast corner of Lancaster County, sort of Lincoln and Lancaster County.
It's changed.
It's changed recently, so I'm vague.
Very recently.
Yeah.
And for those of you who just arrived, we do have some members that haven't returned from lunch yet. Our last hearing went till 12:40, so we may have some people just grabbing a bite to eat, but I'm sure they will be here shortly. And with that, Senator Wishart, you may open.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Anna Wishart, ANNA-WISHART, and I represent the 27th District in West Lincoln and Lancaster County. I'm here today to introduce LR 129, an interim study to review staffing at the Department of Correctional Services. Committee members, many of you have seen me here before on this issue. In fact, this is an issue I've worked on since I started in the legislature. In fact, a few years ago, I introduced LR 172, which was another interim study to look at staffing and a staffing crisis. And a lot of the issues that we were discussing back then ring true today. The reason that I am so passionate about this issue is that District 27 represents a majority of the correctional facilities in our state. I think we calculated represent over 51% of the inmate population in our state, which is within District 27. And so as you can imagine then, we have a significant amount of correctional officers that live in the neighborhoods surrounding the correctional facilities. And when I was knocking doors my first time running for office, I ran into a lot of correctional staff members. In fact, I'd wake a lot of them up because they were working overtime and working the night shift. And on a few occasions, they would actually drive to find me after we had had a conversation to have a longer, more in-depth discussion about the issues in terms of staffing at corrections. Colleagues, I've never seen people so tired in my life showing up at their doors. These are people who were dealing with multiple days of overtime in 1 week consistently. It's not healthy, and it's also not safe for our community to have people who are overworked and tired representing and our public safety units in the state. And so ever since I've been elected, I've been looking at this issue, figuring out what we can do. How do we address overtime? How do we accurately pay people to work within correctional facilities in a way that meets the contemporary needs and decisions that people make, especially in a state where we have low unemployment And there are opportunities, competitive opportunities in other businesses that people can go into that don't require them to miss their children's baseball games, to have continuous overtime experiences, to work in an understaffed unit that is not safe for themselves. And I will be very clear that, in my opinion, from looking at all of this, the responsibility of fixing this issue and the responsibility of how we got here does not rest on any one person's shoulders. And I want to be very clear about that with my intentions at looking at how we move forward. The Director of Corrections inherited a lot of these issues, as did many legislative members. And it's going to take everybody involved to figure this out. What I'm hoping that happens today with this interim study is we have already had a very compelling hearing, Chairman Lathrop, that you held, where I was able to participate in a portion of that listening to a number of correctional officers and staff talking about the issues. And that happened several weeks ago. So I think that was very helpful in us hearing from those who are working within the corrections system. My understanding is that there are some really good negotiations happening with the unions and the Department of Corrections around staffing, pay. And so I'm interested in hearing the progress on that. But my goal is, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, we need to understand what it is going to cost in terms of us being able to adequately staff the correctional facilities that we currently have. And personally, we need to figure that out before we would ever consider looking at any additional facilities. So my goal with this interim study is that when we come in January, we have I understand that there are other policy decisions around our justice system that need to be fixed, but from an appropriations perspective, we need to more fully understand what the investment needs to be for us to ensure that our facilities are adequately staffed for the safety of the public, those that work in the facilities, and the inmates themselves. And so that's my goal with this interim study. And again, I'm really thrilled that we have our head of corrections here to talk about this issue and his progress, as well as other representatives from the union and potentially some other staff members here as well to discuss this issue. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't have any questions for you. I don't see that we have any at this point. Are you going to stay to close, or did you say you have to be somewhere at 2?
Unfortunately, I have to leave at 2:00, so I will not be here to close, but Elizabeth Seacrest from my office will take any notes, and we'd happily follow up with you if you do have questions.
Very good. We are going to take the first 2 testifiers in this order, Director Frakes and then Justin Hubley. So Director Frakes, you're welcome to come forward. I assume you have some opening remarks, and I will make an exception to our light rule if you need some additional time.
Hope they don't go much longer.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you. Although it hasn't been as long as usual.
Well, I know I'm going to see you tomorrow too.
That's right. Good afternoon, Chairman Lathrop, members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Scott Frakes, F-R-A-K-E-S. I'm the Director of the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services. I'll start by acknowledging the contributions of the men and women who work at NDCS. I appreciate the effort and sacrifices that our teammates have made to fulfill the mission of this agency. Despite recent staffing and COVID challenges, staff members continue to do exceptional work, and their contributions to the security of our state and its citizens cannot be overstated. For more than a year and a half, staff members have done exceptional work managing multiple waves of COVID. This has been a highly coordinated effort, utilizing the combined efforts of medical, transportation, custody services, wardens, their executives, the Cornhusker State Industries, food services, truly everyone working within this agency. It's amazing to reflect on the challenges brought on by COVID, which we continue to deal with each day, and how well our staff is managed with constrained staff resources. Staffing's been an issue for the department since before my tenure, but it has been especially difficult the last few months. The department has been impacted by the same labor shortages that have affected many industries as the economy continues to recover from COVID. High staff turnover and a significant decrease in qualified applicants has led to over 625 staff vacancies. We've had to take unprecedented steps to ensure adequate coverage, in particular at the combined LCC, DEC, soon to be known as the RTC, and now at TSCI. In the past 2 months, all 3 of those facilities have switched to a 4-day, 12-hour operational schedule. When I say that, that means 4 days of active movement and 3 days of very limited movement. Like many employers across the nation in Nebraska, we have plenty of jobs to offer, but no one to fill them. Because of the 24/7 operational nature of prisons, NDCS staffing is impacted in unique ways. These include things like mandatory overtime, modifications of schedules for inmates, visitors, and staff, reliance on assistance from other facilities, staff stress and fatigue, and increased tension among the inmates. Despite staff shortages, we continue to provide recommended clinical treatment to our inmate population. Offers to participate are made well in advance of an inmate's parole eligibility date so that individual can complete the programming they require prior to parole. That's not to say that delivery of these treatment opportunities has been without challenges. COVID has complicated the delivery of treatment, but has not stopped it. We continue to monitor the list of individuals who are nearing their parole eligibility date, and we continue to review cases in which someone asserts they've been denied treatment prior to their programming. I think that's a typo. Okay. In many ways, COVID has made us more nimble in how we move people to best manage the disease and provide opportunities for programming. There's no single solution that will resolve the staffing situation. Compensation is certainly a factor, and boosting pay is a strategy that usually has an immediate impact. Over the years, we've implemented various recruitment and retention bonuses. These strategies have had varying degrees of success. Certainly, we would be in a much more dire situation without them. In addition to bonuses, we have also put greater emphasis on recruitment with the assignment of 2 staff positions dedicated full-time to recruitment. Those individuals spend time in our facilities, talking to staff members on every shift, and working with them to identify potential friends, neighbors, and people they know who may be interested in joining the agency. Of the 21 students currently in pre-service, 7 were employee referrals. In the prior class, 6 were referred by current employees. Since September 1st, our recruiters have been involved in 11 job fairs or presentations. Those have included events at colleges, high schools, the Department of Labor, and others. We've expanded our recruitment presence as well by advertising local events like the Applejack Parade and the Pumpkin Run. We continue to explore advertising opportunities with our media partners, which now includes social media, radio, and digital advertising. Our partnership with Peru State College is also successfully moving forward. We currently have 17 students participating in this program who receive tuition assistance and act as interns at Tecumseh while completing their criminal justice degrees. From the beginning of June to August 30th, those students have put in 683 hours of work at TSCI. In all the different ways that we can get the word out and distinguish ourselves from other employers, in all the different ways that we can get the word out and distinguish ourselves, we're doing so. Admittedly, corrections is not the profession for everybody. Unlike other employers, we cannot grant the majority of our teammates an opportunity to work from home. Shift work is not as attractive as it once was, and the lack of staff forces others to help pick up the slack in terms of overtime and additional duties. I am, however, exceptionally pleased by the announcement last Friday that an agreement was reached with NAEP to provide well-deserved pay increases to those staff. I have over 39 years of state service, and I have never seen compensation increases like these. Under this agreement, teammates at 24/7 facilities that are covered under this labor contract will receive a $3 per hour pay increase starting on November 1st, 2021. If everything is finalized, ratified, there will be a 20% increase in the pay line adjustment for classifications identified as high demand and a 30% increase in the pay line adjustment for healthcare classifications identified as critical. This agreement represents the largest mid-biennium contract agreement in Nebraska history, with a value in excess of $40 million for the over 7,508 represented staff. This agreement represents progress on one important piece of the puzzle, as the state continues negotiating compensation for rules-covered staff and staff represented by FOP. Better stated would be negotiating with FOP and making decisions about rule-covered staff. FOP is currently reviewing an offer from the state to increase compensation for represented protective services staff by 25 to 35%. This offer has a value in excess of $15 million and impacts over 1,300 positions within NDCS. Despite the challenges brought on by COVID and our staffing situation, I'm confident both short and long-term solutions will be identified that will put an NDCS on a sustainable path forward. As I've stated before, I'm always open to having conversation with committee members to explore possibilities to increase staff recruitment and retention. I'm going to try my very best to answer every question that you bring to me. There'll be some where I know I'll say I've got to go back and if you want specific information. It is my intent to not be defensive. It is my intent to not minimize anything or for my responses to be seen as minimizing. If I have data that seems to be in conflict with other things that have been presented, I will present that. But I just want to make it clear that I'm here to just try to answer questions and get the facts on the table. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have of me at this time.
I am confident in one thing, that you will have questions. So we appreciate your opening remarks and your willingness to be here today. Senator Geist.
Yes, thank you. And I'm glad to read about the name and the FOP contract reviews and all of that. I'm curious, we heard from many employees several weeks ago, and are there some non-union employees that would then that would fall through the cracks of these negotiations?
There are people that are in the rules and regs, not union represented, that there will be salary compression issues that will need to be addressed. And there will probably be some other employee positions that because of circumstances may also need to be addressed.
And is that anticipated to take place in a timely manner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator McKinney.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Last month, when staff came for the listening session with the Judiciary Committee, we heard that they don't have full autonomy to adjust to their population because control is more centralized with you and your office, central office. Have you guys tried to work that out?
Well, we've been working on educating staff around this issue for some time. We're an agency we're a correctional agency, not 9 independent prisons. We're independent groups of people managing independent groups of incarcerated people. So we have to operate as a system. And while there's a perception of some that there is heavier oversight or heavier control at the central office level, based on what I knew when I arrived and the people that I've talked to that were here prior to my arrival, the only thing that's different is we're more transparent today. We don't hide behind the fact that certain decisions are made at the ground level, certain decisions are made at the mid-management level, certain decisions belong to the warden at the facility level, and some things must be managed at the central office level. Classification being a great example. Not every classification decision is controlled by central office. Decisions that affect the population and the movement of the population within a prison are managed by the facility. But those decisions that could require the movement of somebody to another facility or the need to move them to another facility or the restrictive housing population, because we manage that as an agency, not by individual prisons, those are central office level decisions. We take into account the input of, we depend on, as an example, the facility classification team to give us the information we need so we can make good decisions. But ultimately, that decision is made at a centralized level.
We also heard that the beds that are set that come online next year, I believe at LCC, even if they are available, you guys won't even be able to staff them. Is that true?
Well, today, we certainly couldn't add additional positions to our roster, but we also can't afford to build anything new and then not immediately bring it to life, activate it, because there are warranties that we want to make sure that we are able to test all the system. The answer there is, if we haven't seen enough shift in staffing, enough reduction in vacancies between today and next summer, then we will close existing living units and we will move the population and the staff to those different spaces. We will bring the new stuff to life and we'll continue to work on filling vacancies.
But we still would have the staffing issue though, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and also during that hearing, I think I asked everybody that sat in front of us, did they support building another prison? Majority of the individuals said no. There were some maybes, but the maybes were based on if we could properly staff those facilities. Do you have conversations with your staff about, no, did you guys have conversations with staff before, just kind of taking in a survey before you guys submitted that proposal to the legislature to get their input? Or was it just central office and the governor's office decided to submit a proposal for a prison? Or did you collaborate with staff to see how they felt about it as well?
No, I did not engage the staff members around that decision. A handful at a higher level, but no, not line level staff, I did not.
And I guess my last thing for now, I personally don't agree with individuals sitting primarily in their cells Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and having a lack of movement. I understand we have a staffing crisis, but I also am thinking about the well-being of those inside. And I've got many things sent to my office and calls about this issue, issues with getting showers, issues with getting medicine, mental health, the potential for something bad to happen because of what's going on. Have you guys considered adjusting this philosophy or this strategy to accommodate those inside? Because if this continues for much longer, I don't see how something bad probably doesn't happen.
Well, Senator, I don't like it either. But at this point in time, it's the best arrangement that ensures that we get people the services they need and allows for the amount of movement needed to deliver those services with the staff that we have available. I have high hopes and beliefs that between the negotiations with NAPE, negotiations with FOP, and then the other pieces that will be addressed for the rural and reg staff, that first of all, we'll see a significant downturn in our people leaving, which has slowed down since August, but it's still not where I want it to be today. And better yet, we will see a much, much bigger increase in the number of people coming in, applying for and being hired, so that we can then bring up our staffing levels and get back to a 7-day schedule. There's nothing good about operating on a 4-day schedule, except that the only other alternative at this point would be to simply, well, we can do two things. We continue to do what we were doing, where we promise people that things are going to happen, and then because of staffing, we can't deliver. That creates tension and problems and inconsistencies, because if it's unfortunately Tuesday, 3 Tuesdays in a row where the staffing's too low, then it's a unit that doesn't get to go to yard. Just, it's a hypothetical example. So by going to the 4-day week, we can ensure that everybody's getting access to all the things they need. We're not having these unpredictable, unexpected closings that raise tension and result in other problems. The other option is to simply lock the facility down, and there's not anything good at all about that piece. I'm following up every time I hear that there's an issue about medication, that there's an issue about showers, that there's an issue related to anything that happens on that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so that we can figure out, do we need to make any other adjustments? What do we need to do? Because we knew going into it that we couldn't simply stop movement and stop everything Thursday night and not do anything until Monday morning. That's not how the world works. So I want to make sure that people are still getting the constitutional things that they need. They're still getting the life safety issues addressed that they need. And if there's some other opportunity to do anything above that, we're always looking for that as well.
All right, thank you.
Senator Pansing Brooks.
Welcome, Director Frakes.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good. So along the line of Senator McKinney's questions, are the inmates getting any kind of programming at these, at the places during the 3-day lockdown?
No, not during those 3 days.
So
During
they're
the other 4 days, yes.
Basically isolated?
I suppose most of them have a cellmate, and then there's interaction with staff that occurs. But they're not coming out and moving,
Okay.
very little.
And when did the staffing orders begin at the differing facilities? Because there were those staffing emergency orders were given at different facilities at different times, right?
Right. So in terms of just being on 12-hour shifts with 12-hour operational day and a 12-hour very limited movement day, we started at NSP late October, early November of 2019, and Tecumseh was about 6 weeks after that. So those two facilities went there in 2019. The LCC D&E, or what is soon going to be RTC, went to 12-hour days in June, and then
Of this year.
And because at that point, things had already moved, things were moving so quickly that we knew even that was going to be difficult to see if we could do the 7-day schedule. We went to the 4-day movement schedule with 12-hour days beginning of September at the RTC, and then it's actually effective October 18th at Tecumseh.
Okay, and so the difference was mainly just, what was the difference? Why did it occur on a staggered basis?
Because declaring emergency staffing, there's not, very, very specific, check all of these boxes, but it's an assessment of, can you deliver all the services you need to deliver with the staff that you have and do that safely? So it's a combination of both math and some judgment calls. And in terms of just going to 12-hour shifts, it was, one thing that we learned early on with that was we had less mandatory overtime when we went to 12-hour shifts, but still had overtime. Those shifts come with a built-in 8 hours of overtime a week as part of the regular schedule. So we knew we would gain, in essence, a better distribution of staff and a reduction in mandatory overtime. And then the hope, of course, being that we would be able to stay on the path where turnover was continuing to go down as it had been in 2017, 2018, 2019. But unfortunately, at each point that overtime or turnover dropped, the number of qualified applicants coming in seemed to correspondingly drop. So we just treaded water. When we got to this summer and we made the decision to move RTC to 12s, like I say, at that point, we knew that we weren't gaining. That's the facility that's got the tightest staffing pattern of all of our major institutions. And so with their vacancies, even going to 12s didn't gain us a lot. So then we began the conversations about if we need to, what would be the next step. Because if we move to having to lock down a facility and not have movement and deliver all services to Cellfront, we're not going to be able to do programming. We're not going to be able to do clinical treatment. We're not going to be able to meet those things that we need to do, that we have to do to provide the people, at the very least, those things that will allow them to be eligible for parole or be ready for release. So again, while I don't like the 412, I much prefer it to where we'd be under a lockdown.
Okay, I have a couple more, sorry. So I want to switch gears. You passed out this information sheet on the parole eligible incarcerated population. What was it that you were hoping for us to understand? That there's clearly a population to be released. What were you thinking when you passed this out to us?
So this is, I believe, the 5th or 6th version of this now that We update it every so often. And at this point, one of the stories it tells is that this group of people that are past parole eligibility hasn't changed a whole lot in terms of the math. There's a significant number that got parole and came back on technical violations or new felonies. There's a significant part of the people that there are just a wide variety of reasons they're not granted parole that are outside of anything that I can control. And one of the important things that I look at immediately every time I see the update is down here in the right-hand corner where it talks about how many of the people past parole eligibility have an outstanding clinical recommendation that until it's addressed, they won't be granted parole. So September 1st, it was 148. Then we look at who is that? Well, there's 4 that have tried and been told they have to repeat. There's 57 who enrolled and didn't complete. And then there's 61 who refused or will not accept the recommendation. So that makes up some 120, some of that 148. Then the other thing that we always do is we go back and take a look at, I shouldn't say that, because we haven't had time yet to do that. Normally what we do then is we say, okay, of the remaining, in this case, 25, 23, what's the issue? What's the story? And what we found every time in our breakdowns, we went through those people case by case. It was people that had too short a sentence, the people that had, that just weren't with us long enough before they were parole eligible. So they'll get their programming, they'll get their clinical treatment, but they're going to miss their PED. It was people that got a new recommendation, often because of what they did while they were out on parole. So they go out, they relapse or have a significant drug-related or alcohol-related incident, and then they get a new assessment that says they need residential substance abuse, as an example. So what we've yet to find, and I keep looking, because I know sooner or later there's going to be that individual that we just failed to assess properly or failed to pay attention to them and didn't allow them to get access to it. So the other thing that gets in the way sometimes is people's own individual behavior in terms of engaging in violence or something like that. So do a staff assault and they may miss their opportunity before the PED.
So are you suggesting that we should look at that to help solve some of the problem that we need to, or was it just information's sake? It seems like bringing this indicates that there's some work that we can do on encouraging the parole eligible population to be released.
Yes, and we are, and so is the parole board as well. That's why they went just doing the 2-year hearings to kind of bring people in and help them understand what they needed to do. It's what our reentry staff work on, our classification staff. It's my main reason to continue to bring this forward is that it's an important part of the story. First of all, it tells us that September 1st, there was 892 people past PED. So that's a big group of people. Significant people. If every one of those persons was out and stayed out, that'd be a pretty significant reduction in the population. But then it starts to break down in a lot of detail about who those people are and the challenges that are presented. And as you work your way through it, it becomes clear that while there's a group that we have, well, every one of them, we've got to continue to work on and see what we can do to avoid technical violations, to get people to engage in clinical treatment, to whatever else we can do. But the idea that there's a group of people that are past their PED simply because they didn't get what they needed, that piece, the evidence doesn't support it.
Okay, I have 2 other questions. So Senator McKinney didn't ask it of you, but if staffing remains the same as it is, do you believe we need a new prison or a new prison can be built because we have the capacity for it?
So I'll be continuing to encourage everyone to not think of this as either or. Both problems have to be solved, and they have to be solved. You know, we've got 40 plus years of being underbuilt. I've a design capacity next summer of just under 4,000 beds with everything that's coming online today, 35, 65, something like that. So we'll have 4,000 design beds next summer. And this morning I had 5,520 inmates. And it continues to eke up again since the courts have gotten active again and everything else that's tied to that.
So with
So-
2.6% unemployment in the state, how in the world are we going to staff that? I understand it's a two-pronged issue, but if we don't have the capacity in our state right now,
Senator, it's a problem we got to fix. We got to find the solution.
bring people to the state.
That may be part of it. That may be part of it. Find a compensation level that makes us the most, competitive employer in the state. I don't know what that number is in terms of the work we do. I'm sorry, I can't probably line up with some employers, but, and it's also all these other things that we're talking about in terms of what else can we do to provide people any flexibility in a 24/7, prison setting in terms of scheduling? Is there anything creative that we can do there? And part of what we're working with on FOP, or at least to put on the table, is can we get some more flexibility within contract language to explore and identify alternative work schedules? Get a lot more creative than we've ever allowed ourselves to be in this work. It's certainly building facilities and pieces of facilities, with CCCL being, to me, still my best example. It's just got another award for the quality of its design. Building safe, secure, and healthy environments, as we do today, that are not only all of those pieces for the population, but also for the staff. We have changed a lot in this business in terms of how we build prisons, and recognizing that we've got to build healthy environments for the people that work there and not just the people that live there. So that's another component of why new construction, as opposed to trying to rehab an existing facility that will get us partway there, but won't give us any more capacity, and will really be a compromise. It's not the best investment. So again,
So
challenging, absolutely.
So I've spent 7 years in this seat questioning you as vice chair, and we have asked you what you needed. We have asked what kind of funding was necessary, what we could do. And for years, it was, no, there's nothing we can do. Keep it as is. So now here we are still in crisis mode. Seems like probably more of a crisis mode than ever before. But we are in crisis mode on many fronts, the overcrowding, the understaffing, the fact that programming is unavailable, that more people are jamming
But it's
out.
not unavailable, Senator.
Okay,
I know that that is something that you like to say frequently, but programming is available.
it's available, but not to the extent that it should be. You don't have enough staff to take them there. I understand that it's available, but to the extent that it should be available to make it safest for our communities, I don't
Okay.
think it is available to that extent. Yeah,
It can be better.
you can have a
Agreed.
couple classes and that's great, but
Okay.
so can you say something that makes me feel like the plan isn't, I keep worrying that the plan is to let all of this fail. And so pretty soon we have to throw up our hands and say, private facilities have to come in. Please convince me that that is not the goal of the administration and what will now happen. Because I see nothing that is changing, nothing that is helping us to get to a point where I feel like, oh, we're solving that issue. We haven't solved the overcrowding, the understaffing. We haven't solved any of that. We haven't solved enough people to take the inmates to go get the classes, even though I hear there are people in classes available that are out there, but they're in their cells 3 days a week. So I am very concerned that the whole goal is let it all fail. And then we say private facilities, you must come in and take over this. We lose all ability of oversight in the legislature. So there's my great concern.
All right. I'm going to take my very best, I'm going to make my very best effort to convince you and for you to say, Director, I believe you. Since I came to this state, and I believe I've said it in hearings, and I know I've certainly said it in other venues, I don't support operation of prisons by private entities. As society, we made the decision that we would use incarceration as a way to deal with people that violate our laws. We can't abdicate that responsibility and that authority by turning it over to a profit-making organization. That's my philosophical core belief. Just because I reached out to see if there was a potential for a private-public partnership to build something, that had nothing to do with operating. And that was just a way, much like the South Beltway, to find an effective way to finance and bring a project to life. We ran the numbers and then we pretty quickly realized, no, that wasn't viable. The biggest reason being because we don't borrow money here to build things, which is a great thing, but a challenge at times. But because of that and losing the cost of borrowing money as part of the equation, the public-private partnership absolutely would not work. So I have no interest whatsoever in, and won't support and won't be a part of having prisons run by private entities. You know, we contract services to some degree, primarily medical services. Occasionally we bring in contractors to do work, but I'm not even a great fan of contracting out healthcare in general. We had one facility where we did that. That was Tecumseh. And that nearly blew up on us when they decided they didn't want to do it anymore and gave us 30 days notice. That was a horrible place to be. And if it wasn't for Dr. Deal, we would have had a catastrophe there. So I don't, bringing in contractors for food service or healthcare or any of those, I have no interest in any of that as well.
Thank you, Director.
Senator Brand.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop. Thank you, Director Frakes,
Good to see you.
for testifying today. Previous hearing, we talked a lot about reciprocity. And in that issue, we have law enforcement in the state. Somebody from Wyoming or Kansas wants to come into Nebraska, and we have some problems there that we need to work out to get these people on the job. Do you see that in corrections? If you have a jailer from Kansas or Colorado wants to come work in Nebraska, do they have to go through your full training academy, or is there a shortcut to this system?
We always review to see if there's any parts of their previous training or academy that can offset what we do. In most cases, though, we put people through most of the academy, but we do pay them the same wage, and it's time worked. So, but if we have a situation where we can be comfortable that what they received is consistent with what we do, we can reduce what we offer. There's still a lot of things that have to be gone over because it's specific to Nebraska statute or our practices in the state.
How does Nebraska stack up to the 6 or 7 surrounding states? Is our compensation now the highest out of all of those?
I think we're going to be. I believe we're going to be. But if we talk about the states that literally surround us, no, I know we're not. There are a list of states, 7 or 8 states, that are considered the comparables or the comparables to this state in terms of size of the operations and other economic factors. And in that case, I don't remember that we were the top. I think, though, that we were right at the top.
Do we have any out-of-state recruiting efforts? Do we have some firms out there looking for bodies for our correction system?
We do. We're using, of course, social media, using that as extensively as we possibly can. And then we have a contract with, I'm not going to get the name right. It's a group out of Omaha, business out of Omaha that manages media that reaches out to Iowa, Kansas here. At this point, we don't have an aggressive, we're trying to figure out how we can better reach out to some of the states that may be downsizing in terms of places that have reduced prison population or actually reducing the number of staff. Although the latest thing I've heard is that all that's allowed them to do is stay above water. They've already lost so many staff for other reasons that they're not laying off staff. So Senator, we're talking almost daily about what are we missing, what's out there, who can we turn to. I suspect that within less than a year would be my prediction. There's going to be some businesses that come up that focus just on corrections recruitment, that focus just on recruiting correctional officers or custody staff. Today, we did an RFI about several months ago, not too long ago though, this summer, just to see who was out there. And we got 4 replies, and we didn't get any business entity that actually specializes in that kind of work. So they had ideas, but nobody had anything that they could point to and say, this is working.
Last question. So when you look at who you recruit and what their background is there one specific group that you target, ex-military, ex-police? Have you identified a group of workers that are the ideal candidates for these jobs?
No, what we have is identified that a certain part of people coming out of the military can be a very good fit for corrections, and find corrections to be a good fit for them. Law enforcement has never been a strong place to draw from because our work and expectations, et cetera, are so different, but we still make it known that we're available. It's not that we're not interested, but we've never been seen as a business that law enforcement people retire and then come to us. We're also just looking at this point in time, let's be honest, are there any legal issues that will keep them from carrying a firearm or prohibit them from doing the work that we're required to do? Do they have the basic education requirements, which typically is a high school degree? And are they interested in working for us? That's in our current position. So in a different world, if we were full and now we were really starting to talk about trying to pin down what would be that ideal correctional corporal or whatever it might be. But yeah, it's not our focus today. So, but we do definitely work to try and get connected with the military, people that are leaving the military and or retiring from the military. Bless you. Bless you. And then we've stepped off our efforts at the high school level. So and we have the program with Peru. So we're trying to plant that seed out there about as you're thinking about where you want to go in life, give us a look.
All right, thank you.
Senator DeBoer.
Hi,
Hello, how are you, Director Frakes?
I'm good.
Good. I know I'm sorry I was late. I imagine you were probably relieved when you didn't see me, but here I am.
Senator.
Just because we talked so long, that's why. So I have a couple of questions that are really basic and probably just need a discrete answer for. Why is it Friday through Sunday as opposed to say like Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday? So the period of time in which you're just completely locked down is not quite so long.
Yeah, and as we were working through the math and working through the roster management side of figuring out what would work, we did talk about that. We even looked at, Tecumseh initially asked the question, could we do Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, which would allow for Saturday visits. But unfortunately, on Saturday, the staffing of the facility drops by about 35% because you have all of these other people that are traditionally there Monday through Friday doing the administrative work, the maintenance work, and the other pieces. And while they aren't specifically there to do the direct supervision and direction of inmates, they do provide resources that help support all of that work. So that was a factor. The other thing was if you try to split the days apart, now you lose any efficiency in terms of having one group of staff that's working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as their 12-hour schedule, and another group of staff that's working, covering those other days, and a significantly fewer number of staff that are working weekends. So that's kind of the short answer is if you break up the days, then you lose the efficiency with the staffing. And if you shift that, you could do Tuesday through Friday, you can do Monday through Thursday. When you step away from that, then you lose access to a lot of other resources that help us get the work done.
Okay. Well, I assumed you looked at it, but it's something I wanted to know. How many staff would you need? How many positions would you need to fill in order to go back to, we'll call it regular operations, which I think is probably different than a 5-day-a-week out sort of operation. So first, let's take you can go to 5 days a week out. How many staff members would you need to get there?
Well, I'll answer it this way, to get away from the 4 days of active movement and back to 7 days on a 12-hour schedule, which we still refer to as emergency staffing, because it is, I would say we would need to fill about, these are rough numbers, probably 35 positions at RTC, 35 to 40 positions at RTC, and at least the same number at TSCI.
So about 100.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
you'd still be on 12-hour shifts,
but you at least wouldn't be locked down for 3 days a week.
Right.
You need to do 100 positions.
And how long would it take to train those 100 new people?
From start to they're out on the floor.
If we had the applicants that got us back up to academies with 50 students like we have had in the past, it would take 6 weeks for the first group and then it's 3 weeks later. So
15 weeks,
2 months total.
2 months.
We run 2 academies at a time, but they start 3 weeks apart.
So even if tomorrow everything perfect happened, we'd still be 2 months out.
Yes,
Okay.
plus, because of course you got to
And that
hire.
would be, right. And that would be to still having a staffing emergency. And no one can quit.
Well, you're correct. You're correct. Right. Specific to that, we would have to fill 35 more or 40 more vacancies than we have today at those facilities.
Right, so no one more can quit, plus we have to train. Like, it's
Tough.
it's a real tough spot we're in.
Yes.
I hate to ask this question. What happens next, right? Like, is lockdown 7 days a week, is that the next? Is there another step between that? And how close are we to getting to that step?
For the 2 facilities, or technically 3 facilities at this moment that are on the 4-day operational schedule, there's still some room to make those days even shorter. So that would be the next step. I absolutely hope we don't need to go there, because then that means Senator Pansing-Brooks' programming is not going to get done, period. I mean, that'd be one of the things that gets cut. Access to recreation, all of those pieces. So that's where we would whittle down. And at some point, this whole formula is based on ensuring that the amount of movement we allow for the population balances with the number of staff we have to supervise that. So when our staffing numbers drop, the amount of movement drops. I don't want to have situations where we're allowing more movement than we have people to adequately supervise and ensure safety and security of everyone. And so that is the end game, is if vacancies to continue to increase at those facilities, and we reach a point where we simply we're at critical staffing, as we describe, what we call our critical staffing level. That's the point where movement pretty much stops in a facility. So if we're hitting that 24 hours a day, then there won't be movement.
So, okay. There's some pretty dire things that could befall us, and we hope we don't get there. Let's go back to our ideal scenario, in which we have 2 months from now, 100 new people, nobody's quit. Obviously, this is not possible, but let's assume. At that point, then, what is our percentage of brand new off the line workers, rookies with veterans? At some point, do you have the magic sauce of having enough people who've been on the job for at least a few months even?
Yeah, I can't give you a number off the top of my head. I can tell you that there's 425, probably 430 vacancies today in protective services out of 1,350 positions, give or take. So we're talking a good solid 448. I had that number, man. Over 25%. No, actually, it
It's a
doesn't come out.
third, right?
It's a third, and that, yeah, it just depends on which way you do the math. But let's go with that one. It's a third. And so that would be the ratio today. If we filled all those positions magically in 6 months, then we would have roughly 1/3 of our staff. And then we'd have another part of our staff that were hired that only had anywhere from 6 to 12 months on the job. We've got a pretty junior staff in a lot of facilities. That is a fact, and that's been one of our challenges for a number of years.
So part of this is also the retention piece that
Always has been.
really, really need to work on.
But as I mentioned before, we actually saw good numbers in terms of turnover trending downward, 17, 18, 19. 20, we kind of just, if I remember correctly, we kind of just stayed the same. Everything just kind of stopped actually through a good part of 2020. And then early in 2021, turnover started to eke up a little bit. But what we didn't catch quite as quickly was that applicant numbers were dropping significantly faster. So, and then we saw by April 1st of this year that our applicant pool was half of what it had been. And now our turnover was kicking up, so, which led to this incredible increase in the number of vacancies in just 6 months.
So I was out visiting Tecumseh. It's been a couple months now. I can't actually recall when that was. It was sometime I was out. And
Back in August.
okay, thanks. You remember better what day it was than I do. And there were a lot of folks when we went on to the individual units that were sleeping during the day. I was in the restrictive housing units, as you recall. And I asked why they were sleeping during the day. That seemed strange to me. And the answer was because they like to be awake at night when there are fewer staff present, because then they can get away with more, was what I was told. So that makes me think about during those 3 days when they're on lockdown, it seems like there will be probably fewer staff. That's the reason for doing it. So I begin to get concerned about what sorts of license and activities are going to happen during that 3-day period when people are already under stressors for being alone in their cells or with their roommate, but alone. And I begin to wonder if you're going to see more suicide attempts, if you're going to see more fires, if you're going to see more of all the various things that a person can get up to in their own cell during that time, and what precautions you're taking to sort of deal with those issues.
Always a concern and a valid concern. In terms of precautions, it's actually having the wardens review the logs to see that tier checks are being done. And then in some cases, having someone go back and look at the video to just double verify that in fact the tier checks are being done as regard to the gallery checks, so that people are walking the tiers, interacting, looking through the doors, paying attention to what's going on. So that's one piece of what we do. We've continued to increase our training and I think more importantly, just increase the conversation and awareness around suicide. And our tracking is significantly better on suicide attempts. So now not only do we have, I feel good in terms of the data, and where in the past we may have minimized things that occurred, treated it as simply self-harm or something else. We now, the medical staff, Dr. Deal and his team, take a look at them and call, that's why we're up. We have, at this point, we have 23 documented suicide attempts across the agency in 10 months. So, and that's, that's definitely an increase from last year and probably the highest number in the 5 years that we've had good data. So then it's talking about what do we learn from each one of those? What are the factors? Are there anything where we could do different interventions? Unfortunately, we've got a population of about 1,800 people, give or take, that have some level of mental illness issues. We have a population that in mass deals with depression issues, often just because of the fact that they're incarcerated, compounded then by whatever the conditions of incarceration might be. So we know we've got a vulnerable population. We know that incarcerated people as a whole are a more vulnerable population. We know that COVID has driven some changes in those stats. So it's talking about it, it's being aware, it's analyzing when it occurs, it's raising awareness among all the staff so that they pay attention, so that when they hear suicidal ideation, they don't just go, oh, that's interesting, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, but they pass that information on to others so that our mental health staff can intervene. We use different plans to deal with people that are suggesting or attempting or engaging in behaviors that look like suicide.
So, I mean, I hear you saying that we have a vulnerable population, made more vulnerable by the global pandemic and just the time we live in, made more vulnerable by the fact that they're going to be stuck in their cells for 3 days. I mean, there are a number of risk factors. We have a very high-risk situation, which is occurring for the health and safety of these individuals who are in our correction system. And that's of the incarcerated folks. Also, I mean, we heard many hours of testimony, and I think you know too, that our correctional staff is at a higher risk because of the situation we're in.
Absolutely.
So we are operating now in a situation where the safety of those individuals who are incarcerated and the individuals who work there is less than it should be. The safety is more, there is more of a risk to safety for all of those individuals.
That's a fair statement, yes.
I think that we need to be aware of that when we're talking about public safety and when we're talking about offsetting the risk factors that we have, that we're aware we have a higher risk right now. Okay, and then one last one, just as a curiosity, which border state pays more than we do? You
Right
said-
now, right now, I believe Iowa does. I'm kind of working my way around. That may be the only one, and then there's neighboring states on the other side, like Illinois isn't. But Iowa is, pretty sure is above us. But I don't think they will be after these negotiations.
Okay. That's all I have right now, thank you.
Director, I got a number of questions for you, and I need to maybe do a little take up on the history that you went through with Senator DeBoer. Let's back up even further than that. We've known we have a staffing issue for a decade or more.
Yes.
We've seen that it's challenging to fill these and to keep people as employees at the Department of Corrections long before COVID ever hit. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And when it became acute, or when it became when the first signals of a real problem became evident and a policy change was when we went to 12-hour shifts, and that's when you declared a staffing emergency in 2019.
Correct.
And the
NSP
first-
and Tecumseh.
Yeah, the first place we declared a staffing emergency was at NSP, followed by Tecumseh, and that was like a month later. And I think we had hearings when that took place. We, as a Judiciary Committee, were concerned. We had you in here, and I seem to recall your testimony being it shouldn't last more than 6 months.
I did. I knew at that time that we were at the table or going to the table with FOP. We negotiated what seemed like a pretty thoughtful and meaningful agreement that should have helped move the dial, and here we are.
That's a great point, which is when we hit the 12-hour staffing emergency in those two major facilities, and you went to the negotiating table and you gave the FOP and the staff a raise, it didn't solve the problem.
Well, actually, thanks for reminding me. We were ready. We had conversation about bringing NSP off of emergency staffing. I'd have to go back and look at the notes. I don't think I have them with me. I'm going to say it was probably close to the 6 months, 6 to 8 month time frame, but it was in the summer of last year. So it was right in the height of COVID. My fear was that we would pull them off of 12s, and then because of COVID, have to turn around and implement emergency 12-hour staffing to deal with COVID. So we didn't do it. And then NSP started moving back up.
By the way, Tecumseh, when we went to the staffing emergency, we were also busing people in from Omaha to work there. And we continue to bus people. And that never changed even before COVID.
Correct.
Okay. Then the RTC, what you refer to as the RTC, this new connector between LCC and D&E, that went to 12-hour shifts or a staffing emergency in June of this year.
Yes.
The next series of policy changes came with these 4-day 4-day, what's the term you use?
I call it a 4-day, 12-hour operational schedule.
Okay, and so we've taken the emergency staffing to a new level, and we don't even have a name for it other than 4-day staffing.
4/12s.
It's not like the super duper emergency, but it is in a very real way. We are now running the facility 4 days a week, 12-hour shifts. So we have emergency staffing for 4 days out of the week at RTC, which is LCC and D&E, what we currently think of as those two facilities, and Tecumseh. So they're run 4 days a week, 2 12-hour shifts. And then for 3 days, we have some kind of minimal manning of posts.
12 and 12, but the 12-hour AM shift has a few more staff than the PM shift so that we can make sure we do med lines and any escorts that we need to and get the showers done so we don't have people not getting a shower in that 3-day period. But it's much less than it is Monday through Thursday.
Are there 2 12-hour shifts during those 3 days you're not doing normal operations?
Yes.
When I read in the paper that this was happening, it sounded like some of these people weren't going to get out of their cells for 3 days. Is that the case?
No,
Or is that
everybody,
happening?
everybody should get a shower. So that's not much.
Everybody here would agree with that.
Yeah.
Is everybody getting a shower and is everybody getting out of their cell during those 3 days, Director?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
And again, hasn't gone into effect yet at Tecumseh, so right now it's just.
No, I get it. It's like less than a week.
Next Monday.
Next Monday. Okay. So for the individuals who have family that want to come see them, they can come see them during the 4 days that you're operational. Is that right?
I think they did visits all 4 days. I believe so.
So if I'm an inmate at Tecumseh or RTC and my family wants to come down and see me, they better be available Monday through Thursday, because Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, by the way, if my family works all week and can't come down, they're not going to be able to come and visit me at either of these 2 facilities during any one of those 3 days.
That's correct. Not in person.
Okay. We have a variety of you and I have been through this conversation so many times, I feel like we can pick it up where we left it off, but that's not fair to other people that haven't been in the middle of all these. I know at one time you sat in that chair and said, we're doing everything. We're offering bonuses. We're going to job fairs. We're posting ads here. We're putting up billboards. We're doing everything that one could think of to hire people. That's been true for the years you've been there.
Gotten better and better in our efforts and thoughts and focus, but yes. Well,
Or you've added-
some of the
added-
hiring and some of those other bonuses went from pretty small numbers to pretty significant numbers today.
Okay. Those strategies have included bonuses. And one thing that I was struck by, well, the bonuses, we don't know if they're effective or they're not effective, do we?
It's hard to measure.
You and I can agree it's hard to measure. But we do know that some people that would qualify for bonuses quit before they ever get their first check.
Yes.
And some people who might be getting checks if they stay longer leave after the first one. In other words, you've got a lot of people that never collect the whole $10,000 bonus.
Right.
One thing I was struck by when we had a hearing and the corrections officers came in here a couple of weeks ago is that bonus program seems to be, it's sort of, this person's going to get it in this facility, but the guy that does the same work at this facility isn't going to get it. This person will get it here, but because this guy's worked there for 5 years, he's not going to get it, but the new guy will. And it struck me when I listened to the corrections officers that that's creating some resentments. Have you experienced that your bonus programs creating some resentments?
I have, and I've interacted with many staff over the years, and walked them through things. And of course, encourage them, if it works for them, to come where the greatest need is, because that's why the focus is there.
Okay, well, I will say that that was one of my takeaways. And I appreciate that you're here. I don't have you sitting in that chair and asking questions to try to beat you up, but there were a lot of people that complain about the management style. I don't know if you, I know that there were administration people here for that hearing. Did they share with you some of the concerns that were expressed here by those who testified?
I got some, yes.
Yeah, it was a hearing, I will say. I was impressed that it went from 4:30 all the way till 11 o'clock at night. Like, these people needed to get something off their chest. And I will say, I was also very impressed by their commitment to the service. Like, the people that you have left that haven't quit are committed to the Department of Correctional Services. In a way, I will say, we often talk about firefighters and police officers. I was incredibly impressed with the dedication of these people to the work that you have them doing. Very, very impressed. But also recognized, I will say, that this is, for many of them, this is the last hope. And you appreciate that.
I do.
Now that we are at this new level of staffing emergency that includes only operating for 4 days a week, has the administration or the department brought in consultants to find out what it's going to take to get up to staffing these facilities to regular staffing schedules? Money, incentives, whatever the strategy might be, has anybody been brought in to lay out a plan for how do we get to a place where we are back to regular staffing?
No, we haven't brought in an outside consultant.
I don't even know if such people exist. I really don't, Director.
That's the other piece of it, because I do talk to my peers. We talk regularly, probably twice a month right now, trying to share any ideas and what are out there. And at this point, nobody's come up with that resource.
One of the things that you mentioned a little bit ago, which was in 2019, you entered into a new contract, and you did another one more recently than that, didn't you? These just increasing the money isn't solving the problem.
No.
And I appreciate very much that you entered into a new contract. I've seen, at least I've read what's in the paper and your testimony today with NAPE, and that you are working with FOP to come up with a new contract. I think they deserve it. I desperately think they deserve it, especially the dedication they showed when they were in here testifying. That said, we don't know that that's going to solve the problem either, do we?
No.
So if we raise their pay by 25%, it might help. You would assume, an economist would expect, that would help you with retention, and it might help you with recruitment. But historically, it hasn't.
No, other than the fact that we've never used numbers like this in the equation.
Okay.
So that is a variable that I can't speak to, because I've never seen what could happen when you put that kind of money.
And so that leads me to this observation, and I made this morning. I had an email from Marshall Lutz, who you know well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he shared this with you, but he talked about the history of staffing issues at the Department of Corrections. That at one time, this was a job that people stood in line for. It had benefits, it was well-respected, and people in our generation, you're not as old as me, but I'll say that, our generation saw this as a career path, and that it's his belief, and I think there's a lot of logic to it, that young people don't see this as a career. It's a job, and they're looking for a career, and the Department of Corrections is going to always perpetually have a problem staffing and retaining staff, because the people we need to hire are the young people who are just getting out of school.
I think there's two pieces to that. One would be there's pretty strong opinion that people aren't necessarily looking for careers, but they're looking for opportunities to explore things and to try things. And if they give 2 years to something, that's a fair commitment, and then they look for another opportunity. So our boomer thinking that, you know, you're going to find that job and you're going to find that path and you're going to stick with that career 39 plus years is not the common thinking today. So that's one of the challenges that we've been talking about now for at least 10 years.
That really doesn't help you, though.
No, I know. So
The guys that stay for 2 years and bug out,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
a hallmark of the millennial. I don't want to get in trouble with that statement.
Right, so I just
Being
say,
overly
yeah.
broad,
But if there is an element of truth that the people entering the workforce now see that very differently and are not driven by those things. And clearly, what the last 6 months has told us across, you know, all work is a reassessment of values, a desire to have much different work-life balance, the ability to work those hours that allows you to have access to family and family activities and the other pieces. Flexibility in scheduling, you know, being a huge one. So that takes us back to what I said earlier. I'm trying everything I can do to figure out what do we do different in our own thinking and approaches that would let us be more flexible.
But for the people in this state that are Senator McKinney's age, and I think everybody recognizes he's quite a bit younger than you and I. They are looking for flexibility. They are looking for chances to work from home. They are looking for a better work-life balance. And this isn't it.
Right. So it would be.
And so while I very much feel like the increase in wages are due to the security staff, we have to address wage compression just as a matter of fairness to the people that are there. I'm not confident that's going to solve our problem. And that leads us to what are we going to do when we open 384 beds over at RTC? Or what in the world would happen if we open 1,500 more, Director, unless we right-size our population? Because
So specific to next summer, it'll be a matter of moving the resources to occupy the new space and warm closing other space. So that's the solution there.
And you said that. I want to see if you agree with this statement. What you're saying is when you open the 384 bed facility that we spent $50 million on a couple of years ago, and you've overseen that construction, when we open that, or when we open RTC, we're going to have to abandon other facilities in order to staff RTC and that new 384 bed facility.
We'll temporarily close existing space, and utilize the staff and the population to fill the new piece. Not abandoned. And that's based on if nothing's changed between now and next June. I certainly hope things have changed between now and next June, but it'll take some pretty significant change to get us to where we need to be.
No, I get it. And I'm not, I told you I wasn't going to beat you up. I'm not going to beat you up, but I will make this observation that we've been hoping for that for as long as you and I have been on the other side of this conversation, having this conversation,
Right.
I should say.
You know, the other thing, Senator, that could really make a difference, you mentioned firefighters. There was a time when law enforcement also felt kind of in that same bucket. They were honored and valued by society. They were seen as heroes and champions. There was a time when the military absolutely wasn't. I'm old enough to remember when the military was vilified in this country. And then that changed with time. And today, I think in general, the military is held in much higher esteem. Firefighters, I think because of the work they do and the nature of the work they do, they've always had that hero status. Corrections has never been able to get to that point. And I've always wondered what the world would be like if we treated corrections staff with the same level of respect and honor that we do these other professions.
I have to tell you, and I'll speak for everybody up here, after that hearing the other night, I think we ought to pay them like firefighters. and let them work for 25 years and retire with full benefits like firefighters. These guys are doing heroic work.
Yes, they
And
are.
I was very, very impressed with them, but I don't think we're gonna solve the problem. And Senator McKinney and I did a tour of Tecumseh this summer, and we walked through the yard at the time people were moving across that courtyard to go get their lunch. They were going across, and there was an older gentleman who was just kind of leaning against there was a railing there or something. He was kind of leaning against it, and I walked over and said hello, and he said, you know, I was here for both of the riots that we had here, and it's worse right now than it was then. And I don't know what we can do to be helpful. I don't know what we can do more than raise the pay, except to recognize that even when we raise the pay, I'm not sure we're gonna solve the problem. And if we don't solve the problem, we won't have the staff to staff more facilities or more beds. And that's the thing that has me very concerned as we're going into the next session. Very concerned. We have no way of projecting whether we'll have the staff available when we open that 384 beds. All the strategy, and I'm not trying to embarrass you with this question, but the strategy is let's raise the pay and see if it works.
As well as continuing to do all the other pieces I've talked about.
Okay.
Because it's not a single strategy solution. It's not a single tactic solution. It's a variety of things.
Okay. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your candid answers to my questions. Thank you, Director Frakes. Senator Brand.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop. Real quick, when we lose these individuals, are we doing exit interviews? Is our personnel department doing exit interviews to see why they're leaving?
Yes.
Okay, can we get a really nifty sheet like that to our committee on what the exit interviews are telling you, the top 10 reasons that they're leaving, and by maybe age category and length of service? I would be really interested in seeing that. That's all I've got.
Okay. I think we can give you something. I will tell you though that we struggle to get the level of engagement that we want there. We do electronic, we offer in person. I offer in person to every single person that leaves. And I have noticed the last few months of pickup in that. I've got one tomorrow with somebody. And then about 2 months ago, I asked the wardens to start doing the same thing. So we're trying to approach it from many different varieties. But yes, we can give you something that'll.
I guess my experience when I worked in the corporate world, when people quit or left, they had no problem telling you why they didn't like the place.
I think you'll see on that list a lot of the same things you heard at the session last month.
All right, thank you.
Senator McKinney.
Thank you. I do think there are other options as far as addressing prison. One thing I was thinking about as we were sitting here, I remember I was walking through NSP, I think in July or whenever I went there, and I just remember seeing individuals inside walking with walkers and wheelchairs and things like that. And just thinking to myself, what threat does somebody that has to use a walker or ride in a wheelchair have to society? Do we really need to imprison those individuals? And then I remember when the beginning of the year when I first started coming to judiciary meetings, and I would ask you questions and you said, it's not in my job or it's not in my role to recommend policy or recommendations. But now me and you are both in a unique position to where we can recommend some reforms that need to be made. Because to really, the elephant in the room is we need sentencing reform, we need parole reform, we need to make sure we decrease the amount of individuals that are coming inside and recidivize. All of those things need to take place for this ever work. Because if we don't, if we just rely on building another prison, professionalizing staffing, we're still going to have to build another prison again, more than likely. So I would just say to you and everybody in here, we all need to also be advocating for whatever recommendations come in January and ensure that they get passed. Because if we don't decrease the incarceration rate, the recidivism rate, the amount of individuals that are coming back on parole and probation, and decreasing the amount of time people are sitting inside, especially those who, in my opinion, if you're terminally ill or using a walker or a wheelchair, there's probably a good chance you're not a threat to society anymore. So I'm excited for the opportunity to try to get to some solutions. We have to get past the mindset of let's be tough on crime. Let's do all these things that pushes up the mass incarceration rate in this state, and then say no to anything that needs to take place to decrease the population. If we don't decrease the population, all these hearings and all this stuff is all for nothing, because we're going to be back here in 5 years or shorter saying we need to build another prison. I don't support building a prison at all. I support community corrections, transitional housing, halfway houses, things like that to reintegrate individuals back in society. But we all need to remember that we need to, the third option outside of building a prison, increasing pay for staffing, is also the policy reforms that need to take place. Thank you.
Thank you. And take the opportunity, Senator. Will you be at the meeting tomorrow?
Tomorrow?
No,
He's not in our group.
not in our group. Okay, so, if we were simply talking about building a new facility so we could increase capacity to put more people in prison, I'd have a hard time arguing with you. I would have never brought that to the table. We do have a facility that needs to be dealt with, though, in terms of either replacing it or completely refurbishing it, and the smart move is still to replace it. So that's a piece of it. In terms of the custody level pieces, I think that we'll see what the work of CGI does and where we end up. But as I've shared before, we've got to have people that are appropriate to put in low custody beds. Fortunately, we've seen a decrease recently in the number of people walking away from our community custody centers. But each time that spikes, my sleeplessness goes way up because of the potential for horrible outcomes. So got to have people that can put in them. And then the last piece is it's really amazing that we're doing the CGI work. So it is a great opportunity for us to look at things differently.
No, I just think it's an opportunity for the state of Nebraska to be the example for the rest of the country as far as addressing mass incarceration. When you look across the world globally, there are other countries doing a way better job than us. There's other states that are trying other creative ways to deal with mass incarceration. And I think we have a unique opportunity to be the gold standard as far as addressing mass incarceration in a meaningful way. And that's what I would like for us all to think about. I'm not here to say release everybody, because there's some people that probably can't be released. But I am here to say majority of the people, and we all know, that are locked up currently in our state will be released. And we have to think about what are we doing to make sure when they do release, when they are released, they don't return. And currently, and for my lifetime, in my opinion, we have done nothing to ensure that those that get locked up don't come back.
I got to push back on that one. We sit today at a 30% recidivism rate, which is a 70% success rate. Is that the gold standard? No. 25% recidivism rate is kind of the gold standard in this country right now. And so we're not that far off the mark. And if we are able to successfully do some things that will bring us down to that, good news is we dropped a percentage point this last year. So if we get down to 25%, which will put us in the top, probably 5, at the least the top 10 in the nation in terms of recidivism, that difference translates to about 150 people. Those are real people, real beds. So it's not to say that isn't significant, but that is one of the pieces of getting us to where we need to be. But in and of itself, it's not going to change the numbers the way I think some people believe. So I guess I'll just stop there.
It's some stuff outside of correction, like investing in communities where those individuals come from, that need to take place. I just think the United States as a whole does a horrible job. So even if we get to 25, I still think that is horrible, because what's the point of locking people up if we already can plan for them coming back in some type of way? So I just think the United States does a poor job compared to other nations in the world, and we are the worst. And being the gold standard really isn't great when you compare ourselves to other nations. But thank you.
Senator Geis.
I've just been struck by remembering what I heard in the testimony that we had a few weeks ago. And that some of us heard that the majority of the people who testified did not agree with building a new facility. When some others of us heard more people say yes, they did agree with building another facility, but qualified that with, we need to make sure this staffing problem is taken care of. And I was just wishing we had that transcribed so I could go back and hash mark how many said what, but we don't. And so that I regret that, because I heard it differently, which is a frustration. But that said, with this staffing problem that we're having, is this also being experienced? I know the broad employment problem is being experienced across the country. Is this specific type of staffing issue within state-run facilities also an issue in other states?
It is nationwide. There's been a standing committee with the Correctional Leaders Association, the group of directors, secretaries, commissioners across America, about 60 members, for a number of years. But now there's a special committee that is meeting and is talking about going to a monthly meeting because of the urgency and the issues are becoming so significant.
So the crisis that we're experiencing, other states are also experiencing. And, you know, I just think that's really important for us to understand, that this is a societal problem. It is not necessarily an administration problem, or, I mean, in my opinion, we've always had underbuilt for our population. And I know that because I've looked at other states' populations and what they have available. So that's just a simple fact. But I also think that we get very short-sighted in our state, thinking our state's worse than any other state out there. And I don't want to minimize the problem, but I also think we need to be fair in saying this is not just a Nebraska problem. This is a country problem. I contend it's a cultural problem. And a lot of what our problems are not going to be able to be addressed by paying people more or any kind of reform that we do other than personal, cultural, family reform. And that's my soapbox. But anyway, I don't really have a question. I just, other than I wanted to know if it's beyond the state of Nebraska.
Appreciate that.
Senator DeBoer.
So I'll take up that line of questioning. So other states have crises, but other states aren't going to 4-day openings in their prisons. How many are doing that?
I don't know.
Small number?
Hasn't been any poll yet. I don't have a good sense of how they're addressing it. Some states have a history of continuing to run fairly normal operations no matter how low their staffing gets. That's never been our approach in this state to my knowledge, and it certainly is not my approach, and I wouldn't be able to run a department where that was the expectation. So that's one way that facilities or systems manage. But I don't know, Senator. But there's not been any national poll yet to see how people are
So
doing.
when you're talking with your colleagues in other states, would you say that our staffing problem is worse on average than the others that you talk to? Or is it better on average? Like, is our problem worse or better on average?
Very much this kind of assessment, I'd say we're on the worst side of 50%, but I don't know if we're in the top 25% or, I hear about states that are running facilities with 40+% vacancies and still appear to be making them operate and meet whatever their needs are and expectations. What I do know is that the conversations that I've been involved with have consistently been around, what have you tried? What are you doing? Here's what we tried. Here's what we're doing. And the problem since April, that's kind of a consistent mark, is just, it's escalated so greatly and so quickly across the country this summer.
So others at 40%, what is our staffing level right now?
Well, so overall, for the agency, we're down 25%.
But in particular facilities, so let's say at the penitentiary, since that was the first one.
Right. Custody side of the house, about 30%, the protective services. And I'd have to go back and get a number. They're probably at 25% in other positions. Tecumseh, somewhere between 35 and 40% right now, which is why we're moving to that number, moving to the 412 schedule.
And I imagine that the overcrowding, so you're at, an amount of staffing level that would be for design capacity or for some other capacity?
Staffing is rarely tied to population numbers directly. It's usually tied to spaces. The difference would be, I'm going to guess at the question that you were asking, if we were at design capacity today, then we would have a significant part of our population that was housed single cell, and we would have moved inmates into double bunks, and we would have closed living units. That would be a strategy that we could use. So we reduce the number of staff it takes to operate spaces and get better efficiencies. But we don't have that flexibility. We've got nowhere to move, so we could close a living unit, except next summer.
It turns out that we haven't quite gotten to the place where you can guess what I'm thinking yet. So she didn't quite guess the question. No, my question is, if I'm thinking that we are at a lower staffing level than we should be by whatever, 30%, 25%, whatever it is, and that you're saying that compared to other states in the country, we're probably in the worst half for our staffing problems. And then I also have the fact in my mind that we, at least at one point, were second worst in the country for overcrowding. And if the capacity of staff doesn't change based on overcrowding, if you're looking at that, we have sort of the regular problem that everyone has, and maybe we're a little worse off than everyone in terms of staffing. And then we have the additional problem of the overcrowding. So that does paint us in more of a crisis than some of your colleagues.
It does in terms of our ability to close living units, close whole facilities, and do some of those strategies that allow you then to condense your staff and get greater efficiencies. We don't have any ability to do that.
All of that I understand, and that's a good point to reflect on. But I would also say that based on the conversations we had when the staff came in to talk to us, there is just an inherent dangerousness to having fewer staff. If there's an assault, it takes longer for people to get there because they're further away or there are fewer of them. So if there's a staff assault, it takes longer. So there are problems that are due to the lower staffing numbers. There's also problems with the overcrowding numbers that maybe I'm wrong, but just having more people to take care of is probably a bigger toll.
That does stretch your staff thinner. No. What I would say to you is if we were fully staffed at 2,500 teammates across our agency, we'd have more than adequate resources to do everything that we'd like to do and want to do with the 5,500 people we have today. So.
Yeah, I don't want us to downplay what's actually happening here. And I think that you understand the gravity of the situation that we're in, but I want to make sure for the people in the back seats and the press and everyone that comes here that while other states may be having staffing issues, we're really in a sort of unique situation that we have this very overcrowded situation. We also have a history of very bad staffing issues in terms of being able to keep up with it. And we're at an inflection point where we're not just in a staffing emergency, but we're now at that super duper staffing emergency situation.
And all I would add to that, Senator, again, is you would have to look at each individual state to see there are other states that may be exactly at design capacity, but they don't have another bed to be had. All of their construction is 2-person cells. There's not room for a third bunk in that room. So their operational capacity and their design capacity match, and then as their staffing numbers drop, the basic impact is the same. The only advantage we could have today if we had 1,000 fewer inmates is I'd start condensing spaces and looking at how could we reduce our overall staffing needs. So anyway, but I do understand what you're saying. It would be nice to have more staff and fewer inmates.
And we're in a grave situation. There's a lot of
Yes,
gravity.
we're in a critical situation in terms of overall operations, and I've used the word crisis specifically with the staffing piece of it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it, Director. Thanks for being here. You and I will meet again tomorrow.
See you then.
All right.
It's going to be, I'm enjoying, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Senator Brandt, we will do something with the exit interviews.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. The second person we were going to invite up before we open it up is Justin Hubley. Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon, Senator Lathrop, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Justin Hubley, Justin Hubly. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of Public Employees, NAPE AFSCME Local 61. I'd like to thank Senator Wishart for the invitation to be here today as well. I was invited initially to talk about the staffing situation, but after the hearing a couple weeks ago, you heard from a number of our members. Our union represents about 8,000 state employees at 58 different state agencies, including the Department of Corrections. We represent about 600 employees at the Department of Corrections. They're the non-custody staff. They work in healthcare positions like registered nurses, LPNs, staff care technicians. They are maintenance workers like plumbers and electricians. They are food service workers like cooks and food service assistants. We also represent the workers at Cornhusker State Industries. We reached a historic agreement with the governor's office last week on Friday, and you heard some of that from Director Frakes. And I thought I'd just touch on a couple highlights of that, some that Director Frakes mentioned and some that he did not. First, our facilities employees will receive a $3 an hour differential for working at those facilities beginning on November 1st. In addition to that, there's about 65 job classifications that will see increases to their minimum salary between 20 and 30%. We'll also be paying double time for overtime until July 1st, 2022. The thought there is that by increasing the amount of compensation for overtime work during this especially critical period, more people may begin to volunteer for those opportunities. Additionally, under our current contract, when our staff members work out of classification, for example, a recreation specialist at a prison may be assigned to a corporal position because they're short-staffed. Under our current contract, employees had to do that work for 15 consecutive days before they would be paid a higher rate of pay. And not to be, well, I'll just be direct. The Department of Corrections is a big offender in our current contract that they would skirt that 15-day limit to not have to pay people. They'd assign somebody to do it for 10 days, 14 days, rotate them out, have somebody else fill the position. That's just bad management. So not to be rude to Director Frakes today, but they do have some cultural management problems at the Department of Corrections I believe he's aware of, and I believe he's committed to helping try to fix. So under this new agreement starting November 1st, our folks who do that work out of class will be paid after doing that work for 1 day as opposed to 15. And hopefully that will help, again, get people to do those jobs. So those are some of the highlights of that agreement. Heard some conversation before about will money solve the problem? Because it hasn't before. The money that's been put on the table prior to this historic agreement are pennies in the grand scheme of things. What we have tried before has not been close to enough. This is the most significant pay increases we've seen in a long time. And so I wanted to spend more time answering your questions today, but I leave you with two things that I think you as legislators can do. First, support this funding. I assume you'll see a deficit budget request from the administration when you're back in session. Vote yes on that. That's what's going to fund this. Secondarily, this is a bigger problem. A not very exciting piece of legislation that many of you are probably not familiar with is the State Employees Collective Bargaining Act. Not many people read it unless you're me, because I deal with it every day. But the way that law is crafted in Nebraska, it's one of the reasons why this was a smoldering fire for decades before the staffing shortage hit. Administrations previously have used that law to keep wages, what I would say, artificially low. There's a comparability formula in that legislation that if you cannot reach an agreement with the administration, they can bring you before the Commission on Industrial Relations and have them settle the dispute. But the way we settle the dispute is by comparing salaries here in Nebraska to between 7 and 9 comparable states. The law doesn't define what those states are. It just says they can't be more than twice the size of Nebraska or less than half the size of Nebraska. And it also says that the jobs that the people we're comparing to have to be similar in nature. When you compare your salary to a worker in Arkansas, I'm here to tell you, I don't think the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services has ever lost an employee to go work at a prison in Arkansas. But they sure have lost them to the Douglas County Jail, to the Lancaster County Jail, to Bryan West Campus to go be a nurse there. So when we have legislation that's not working, we have to think of a better way to do this. And so I hope long term we can be committed to figuring out a better way to compare wages so that when we keep people here and we negotiate contracts, and if we do reach an impasse, we have a way to solve that in a manner that fixes the problem instead of compounding this problem, which has happened for more than a decade. So I'm happy to answer any of your questions today. We're hopeful that this will solve part of the problem. Senator Lathrop, I will also tell you I'm a millennial. I can't answer all your questions on behalf of my generation, but I might be able to help reset your Wi-Fi password if necessary.
Senator McKinney.
Thank you. And thank you for your testimony. Would you say that we are hoping for a miracle to happen?
No, I don't think we're hoping for a miracle. I think people have been in a room and said, we have been saying there's a problem and a crisis forever, please work with us. And that call was finally answered. So I'm not sitting here hoping. I'm sitting here saying, we just reached an agreement. It's going to roll out in a couple of weeks. Now we got to go recruit and get people in here, and we got to make sure they stay.
So fast forward to July 2022. Hypothetically, we still have the same issue. What do we do then?
Well, I think we'd have to come back to the table and meet again. If it's not just a wage issue, then we have to talk about other things like scheduling, like vacation time, like any other ways to help attract and retain staff. I will tell you, I appreciate the position that maybe, it's not all about money, but at the end of the day, if this employer pays more than the next person over in town, people are more likely to stay.
You mentioned we would have to support some type of bill, giving some more money. I don't know. I just think everything around prisons it seems to always be centered around money and not around people, even staff. I feel as though some of the staff that spoke at that hearing, money can't solve what they've endured.
Can't fix bad management.
Money can solve the conditions that these individuals that are inside are living in and what potential long-term effects they're going to deal with. And it always comes back to, let's give more money, let's do this, let's do that. How are we helping people? How are you helping those that are employed inside within your union? How are you helping those people?
If you're a food service worker and you're going to see a $6,200 annual increase as of November 1st, actually for a food service worker right now, it's going to be with a 20% increase, it's going to be closer to an $11,000 annual increase. That's life-changing money when you make $12 an hour. So to me, that improves their life. They say, I think I'm going to stick this out a little bit longer. I'm being recognized for what I'm doing. And hopefully, I would hope, having spent no time in prison in my life, if you had a happy staff, hopefully they'd be willing to take care of the inmates. So I do believe we're helping people.
I understand they'll get more money. But what I'm asking is, what are you doing as far as offering some type of mental health counseling, some type of family support outside of saying we advocated for you to get paid extra money? What else are you doing to help them as individuals.
Sure.
Not just you're getting more money into your bank account.
Absolutely. So one of the things negotiated in our contract is an employee assistance program that a number of our members use and have told us anecdotally that it's been a godsend to them when they are in a stressful situation. That's not just the Department of Corrections, it's all 58 different state agencies. They can get free mental health counseling and things like that because it's negotiated in our contract. State agencies have to provide it. If it wasn't negotiated in our contract, they could take it away at any notice.
I asked my last question, I think. Would you say that if there was a decrease in population size, it would probably make our prison system a little safer?
I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that. I will tell you my background as a school teacher, and when my class size was smaller, I absolutely had better control of the classroom and absolutely had better success.
Okay, so then the follow-up is, will you or some representative from the organization come January, when we do have recommendations on the table, will you guys be coming in to support potentially? I'm not saying you agree with them because they haven't been introduced, but I do think that not even just you or correctional staff and police and everyone else, I think you guys have a role in making sure this situation is better as well. And what I mean by that is there are things that we could do as a state to decrease the population and still keep our communities safe. But we need you guys as well to advocate for those things, because when it's just me and Senator Lathrop or Panning Brooks or someone else, it's kind of like a repeating record. But we also need other individuals on the other side of the table to say, hey, there are ways to increase safety inside and outside, and we support them. So I'm not trying to commit you to anything, but what I'm saying is if something gets introduced and you guys like, oh, that's a good idea, I hope that you show up and support it.
I, on behalf of our organization, I try to show up as much as I possibly can. We're a member-led organization, and our board of directors is committed to having a seat at the table and having our voice heard. And so if you're invited to hear our voice, we'll be on the other side of the table for you to listen.
Thank you.
You bet.
I see no other questions. Thank you for being here today. We will now open it up to others who wish to be heard on LR 129. Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon, Senator Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Doug Kovenek, spelled Koebernick. I work for the legislature as the Inspector General of Corrections. I was going to come up and just kind of run over my most recent annual report and go through some of the staffing data. But after listening to the testimony, I kind of changed my plans. And what I did was put together some notes here just to go through real quick before opening up to questions. First, I want to say that the hearing for staff that you held really put a human face on what we laid out in our annual report when we talked about the staffing issues. And I want to thank all the staff who came forward and the staff who contacted me in our office after that to share additional experiences and ideas. So I appreciate that. Director Frakes said that the NAEP raises were well-deserved, and I agree, and I'm really glad to hear about that agreement. I think that is has the potential to be a game changer. But it's also important to note that those were well-deserved back in 2016. And that's what our annual report called for back then. And maybe if we'd done, I don't want to be like a backseat driver or a Monday morning quarterback, but we got to remember that we have to look deeper and see what really led to all these issues with staffing. And there were problems back then that weren't addressed. Wage compression. Senator Geisman, you talked about the need to address wage compression. I'm really glad you brought that up because that is another important issue that's been out there for a few years that really needs to be addressed. Over the weekend, I had many people who were in those positions reach out to me and say, okay, NAEP got that money. What about us? Do you know if we're going to get that assistance? Because we need that. We want to stay. This is our career. Those people have been in the positions for quite some time. They're leaders and everything, but they need to have that issue addressed. I am hopeful, and I would guess that they will be addressing that because they really don't have much of a choice, because that needs to get done now. Director Frakes mentioned that the number of those leaving has gone down, but I want to put that in a little bit of context, because from May till August, those numbers were really high. So if we have a 1 month decrease, okay, that's good, but you can't just pull that 1 month out of a trend line and say, okay, things are looking better, because at some point you run out of people leaving. And if positions are vacant, you also can't turn them over. But I have a handout that I gave you that is from our annual report that shows that the protective services vacancies are a turnover over the last about 10 years or so. And you can see that back in 8-10 years ago, it wasn't near what it was today. But of course, this last fiscal year is not even the highest it's been in the last 5 years. So while we have seen an increase in those turnover of those positions, it's not historic really for this past fiscal year. So there's more to be done on that. While programming is offered throughout the department and at the facilities where they have the Monday through Thursday schedule, and Director Frakes talked about how programming is still being delivered, it's very important to know that there is a statutory requirement that the department look at their programming and do an analysis of it and an evaluation to decide whether or not that programming is actually effective and working or not, and if it's running according to the way it is designed. That was passed back in 2015, and they have not really done that. That's something that I brought up in our annual report this year. They have made a commitment to that, and I'm encouraged by that. But we can talk about programming being delivered, but we need to know that it's actually good programming and effective programming. So I'm hopeful that the department will do that analysis and evaluation over the next 6 to 12 months and figure out where they're at. Because we have right now domestic violence programming. There's over 800 people in the system that are in need of domestic violence programming, and they don't offer it. Only when you get to community corrections, then you can pay for it yourself and maybe get it. But there's other people that are inside the system that then get out and they don't get that program they need. Violence reduction program used to be like a 9 to 12 month program. Now it's a 6-month program. It's set up. So you're supposed to be with a cohort working together. Your staff in your living unit are all part of that. And everything. What those guys do is go to class 1 or 2 hours a week, take that class, go back to their existing situation. That's not following the plan for that program. So we need to do that too. While the corporals have received bonuses over the last few years, caseworkers, which is a very much needed position in the department, they have not. So I wanted to bring that up, and I'm hopeful that they will get bonuses going forward, or with the FOP contract, see some significant changes in their wages. And then finally, I would say this, that the Ombudsman's office and my office both have been receiving a significant increase in contacts from both staff and incarcerated individuals about the conditions in the facilities. So we're working hard to look at those, to bring those issues to the department's attention and to help them so that they can address any concerns that we see on a regular basis. So with that, I'd be happy. Oh, one more thing. I did hand out a sheet on staff exit surveys that was in my report. In my 2019 or 2020 annual report, I made a recommendation that they redo that and update it and make it actually work. And they haven't. I'm encouraged to hear that Director Frakes says they're doing something different now. But in the past year, but since that report, they haven't. And in 2 years, I think they've had about 130 people out of 1,000 people or so that left that actually did the exit survey. And there's some information in there for that. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Brand.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop. Thank you, Inspector General Copeland. Why are they failing so bad on exit surveys? I mean, the proper procedure, that person is leaving, your personnel department gets them in the room, and that personnel manager asks you why you're leaving. I mean, that 66 out of, that's unbelievable. They just hand them a paper and say, mail it back?
It's an email that they get. So I think that's part of the problem. In the past, I've testified about how people had come to me and said the only person who talked to them after they put in their resignation was somebody named Survey Monkey. And I don't mean to be flippant or anything, but that's actually, and Director Frakes said, I don't remember that. But I went back and looked, and sure enough, for the first few years after I started this position, that's how they got their exit interviews back then. I've been kind of pounding that drum for a while that they need to make changes to that. Because they really, if you want to find out why people are leaving, do that correctly. Also, when people announce that they're going to leave, go find them right away. The data shows us that since the beginning of 2015, projected through the end of this year, almost 4,200 people will have left the department. If 10% of those people had stayed, and we had identified why people were leaving and addressed some of those concerns, if we just kept 10%, we wouldn't be in this situation right now.
All right, thank you.
Senator
Just a short question. You mentioned caseworkers.
Yes.
They're not represented by union, are they?
FOP.
They are by FOP?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thanks, as always, thanks for being here, and thanks for being the eyes and ears of this committee over at the department. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Michael Chipman, MICHAEL I'm the president of FOP 88, and we're the ones that represent in corrections, caseworker, corporal, and sergeant positions. When talking about what Director Frakes spoke about, I'd like to mention specifically some points that I guess he failed to mention. Specifically, and the state's offer, the 25 to 35% they offer to us, they had a bunch of stipulations. Some of the stipulations included that if certain retention goals weren't made, the money could be pulled, and things of that nature. It also includes some scheduling things where they get complete control on schedulings, up to including our staff would have to work 4 16s and possibly a 5th 12-hour shift. And so, needless to say, I'm not trying to bargain over, public bargaining, but we won't accept any offer that doesn't actually fix this problem and that isn't making it so our families aren't having, or they're going to actually be able to see us. So that is kind of a little synopsis on that piece. There's been previous discussions about our last offers. If you look at our last offers, they had some for senior staff. There was a 10% offer at one point in time, and then at one point in time we got about 5%. To give you an idea, when I started in the Department of Corrections, I was making $13.81 an hour, and that's back in 2013. We are, up to $20 an hour, but it's just it's not significant enough. I mean, we're talking between 5 to 8%. And while we were neglected for 20 years, constantly, if you look at the old NAPE contracts from early 2000s to about 2015, there was 1 to 2% raises each of those years. And so we just fell further and further and further behind, to the point that senior staff up until 2019, up until 2019, they were all making the same wage. I was making $13.81, and Carla Jorgen behind me, who has 20 more years than me, she was making $1 more than me. So we've been dealing with that. We had a staffing issue going on then, not nearly as bad as we do now. So while, money alone does not fix everything, it is a big piece, and we have to have a significant compensation package over what the counties are. To give you an idea, the counties currently, I just got a report from Lancaster County, they're missing 7 positions. I'm missing.
Say that again.
Lancaster County is missing 7 positions. That's it. We're missing 450. So, I mean, I get we're a lot bigger than them, but that's a pretty significant difference. And so, we need to work on getting that and a significant, and we need to do it now. I mean, just last month, we lost 26 staff. So, as far as the millennial piece and all that, part of what you see like Sarpy County and other counties do is they do have different schedules that they offer. There's a lot of people that enjoy, we call it the Panama schedule. I don't know if it originated in Panama or why they call it that, but it's where you go work 4 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, 4 days off. And that makes you have like 14 days off a month with your family. And there's a lot of young people really enjoy that. We can talk about those kind of schedule things, and they have to be heavily controlled so that the employee wasn't getting, I don't know what the nice word is, but not getting screwed, frankly, on the deal. But we can't even talk about that when we're down, 160 staff at Tecumseh, when we're down about 100, 110 at NSP. over 100, my last report is close to 130 at LCC, DEC combined. I mean, we can't even discuss these flexible schedules until we actually have staff to implement them. So I guess it's kind of a quick synopsis.
Any questions for Mr. Chipper? Senator McKinney.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. Could you clarify something? You said in the new contract that you guys so if you guys don't, if retention rates don't stay the same or get better, there's potential for these pay increases to.
So for clarification, we have not accepted an offer from the governor, and but that was part of the offer that they have made to us. Yes.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and we will never agree to anything like that. I can assure you that. So, no, I'm president.
Senator
And
Geist.
you said you represent the caseworker, the corporal, and the,
Sergeant, correction sergeant. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry if I talk too fast.
yeah, you're fast, but that's okay.
Senator Brand.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Does FOP represent Lancaster or Omaha corrections?
So other FOPs do.
The cities.
Yeah, the other FOPs do. I don't personally because we're a separate subordinate lodge is what they call it. So, but yes, they're all other FOPs.
All right, thank you.
Senator McKinney.
I don't know, I just feel like we kind of been beating around the bush on this, realistically speaking. From now into July 2022, do you foresee this getting better, honestly?
If we can come up with a significant compensation package that isn't full of stuff, I do see it getting better. Now, it's not going to go from terrible to great. I mean, there's no way for that to happen in that short amount of time, but I do think we can start moving in the right direction. We also go back into bargaining next year. We would hope that we have to continue to build off that. That's another piece to kind of talk about what happened last time. We got this raise in January 20, and then when it was time to bargain for the next 2 years, the governor's office said they had no interest in giving us any other raises. So all we received was our dollar merit raise. And so our staff saw that they're going to get no significant raise for the next 2 years, which didn't help this crisis any further.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator DeBoer.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. Is your FOP affiliated then with others outside of the state? Do you have any interactions with other groups outside of the state?
We once in a while we talk to other FOPs out of state. We recently just went to a corrections lodge in Illinois.
And when you go to those folks in other states, is there anything that you could bring back from them in terms of, what ideas or strategies other folks have developed? I mean, we heard the director saying that he's talked to some of his compatriots in other places. So any ideas from other states?
We really haven't talked a lot about that. I'm sure that that was actually, like I said, I'm not trying to get everything in our offer. It was part of our offer when we made with the governor's office was to just to work on a recruiter type position and have the FOPs maybe kind of do a partnership. And so we could recruit from other states, from our other FOPs, what's working in Illinois, what's working in California, et cetera, things like that. But no, as far as us on our own, we have not done a lot. I know Illinois, they have like 1 or 2 prisons that are not doing well as far as staffing, but for the most part, most of the prisons are. And to be fair, their corrections are paid significantly more than even their police. So it's kind of going back to that piece where it's, that significantly helps them. I told them some of our stories and they were pretty dismayed.
Significantly horrified?
Yeah. I mean, of course, they see terrible things too. I'm not trying to say, it's a very hard job no matter what state you're in, but yeah. They, like we're having issues at community corrections and Omaha Correctional Center. I'm sure you just saw that assault we had. Their medium security facilities are not the issue like we're having everywhere. And when they may be missing, I don't know what their exact number are, but when you see other states say they're missing this many, I think I just read a report that 700 are missing in Detroit. We got to understand Nebraska has how many facilities we have? 8, 9. I could count them all, but in Detroit's how much larger of a population than us. So, it's a significant percentage difference. We are missing a lot more officers percentage-wise than the others here I'm hearing from, so.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Yep.
I don't have any questions for you. I do want you to pass along to the members that we appreciate what they do. I was very impressed with their a dedication to the Department of Corrections and their work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was amazing hearing from all of them come down. I represent the guys that was moving. I mean, so it's awesome. I mean, what they come down, that's how much they care. They want this together. They care about their job. They care, about the people that they oversee, about each other. You'll never meet a better group of people. Just
Right. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Next testifier.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Spike Eicholt, S-P-I-K-E. Last name is E-I-C-K-H-O-L-T, appearing on behalf of the ACLU of Nebraska, testifying on this legislative resolution. We want to thank Senator Wishart for introducing it. This staffing issue is a problem, and disagreeing or arguing about the reasons for that problem doesn't matter. Well, actually, it does matter because it just shows that it is a problem, whether it's generational, millennials, whether it's low unemployment, whether it's the overcrowding, whether it's the low pay, whether it's just something that's statewide, cultural wide, highlights the fact that you cannot staff the prisons you got. You cannot make the commitment to construct another one. You already know that to be true because your director has acknowledged that. The authorization that the legislature made a couple of years ago to create that new highly structured building at what's going to be called RTC, when that goes online, they're already going to have to close down or modify, not abandon, modify or shut down other facilities or other component facilities just to staff that one. So it can't be done. You have the three largest prison systems now at some sort of level of staff emergency. And two of them been like that for 2 years now. And as Chairman Lathrop asked Director Frakes, I remember because as always, I usually watch these hearings live. And I remember Director Frakes was there shortly after the announcement that the Nebraska State Penitentiary was going to a staffing emergency. And then just a few weeks later, Tecumseh did the same thing. And at the time, Director Frakes, and I don't want to speak for him, but my memory of his testimony was it was going to be temporary. We had this new sort of salary bonus plan that we're going to provide, and I think it was $10,000 then, that would hopefully address the situation. That was before COVID and everything that happened with the pandemic and with employment and everything in this state and otherwise. But that was intended to be temporary. There was assurances given verbally, similar to what you heard today, that the problems were going to be addressed, and it wasn't. And we're now at a worse staffing level supervision. I was here the day on September 15th when the staff testified. One of the things that really struck me that I just wanted to add for the record here today, and it was often in response to what Senator McKinney asked when he asked the different people testifying, would a new prison help? And I heard the majority said no, not until at least we get, and if they did say yes, there was a qualifier, as soon as we get the staffing online here, with existing facilities we have now, then you can maybe talk about constructing a new prison. But one of the other things that many of the people who worked there that I thought was really insightful when they were asked what could make things better in the facilities, in addition to having more staff help them, it was programming for the inmates. Availability programming and meaningful programming, because as you heard, many of the staff people describe situations where inmates had a lot of idle time. They couldn't really lose anything because they didn't have anything to lose as far as privileges and visits and programming. That there were a lot of problems with inmates consuming drugs, drinking alcohol, being disrespectful of staff, and it was just something that is a byproduct of the overcrowded system that we have. Director Frakes insists that during the 4 days of the 7-day week for the 3 facilities programming is available, you get correspondence from inmates, they tell a different story, and you've heard from the staff as they just related, they tell a different story. And even with Frakes' acknowledgement today, Director Frakes' acknowledgement today, 40% of the week, inmates are not getting any programming. And that's your 3 largest facilities. The graph, I didn't see the graph that he handed out, but to talk about the number of people who are parole eligible, one thing to keep in mind, those people who are parole eligible, and this is just anecdotally, but I think my statement's can be verified, those people are close to their mandatory release date. They're going to get out. No supervision, they're going to get out. I haven't seen the CGI data information, but what I would suggest are a couple of the ideas that this legislature or this committee could do with respect to reform. One would be sentencing reform, to provide for an actual incentive for inmates to do programming so they could be parole eligible, so they have a reasonable period of time. This acknowledgement that Director Frakes made today, that there's a certain percentage of the population who don't want to do the programming, they're going to get out anyway. That's not something to be proud of. Why are you letting the prisoners choose whether they get rehabilitated or not? You ought to either, if not mandate, at least certainly incentivize it. And you can do that with a similar bill that unfortunately didn't become law, to have a statutory buffer between parole eligibility and actual mandatory release date. And secondly, there's a large number of people, I've looked at this number before, who are in prison on parole revocations. And you heard a couple of people testify on September 15th about that some of the staff mentioned that sometimes it seems like guys come back on a parole violation for some relatively minor thing. And the one staff person gave the example of, and this is self-reported by the inmate, that he was in there for a traffic violation. That's something that you can look at legislatively if there's reform next year. I'll answer any questions if anyone has any.
No one has any questions for you today, but thanks for being here, Mr. Eichel. Anyone else wish to be heard? Welcome and good afternoon.
Pardon?
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon to you as well. I'm here, my name is Deborah Johnson, DBRAJOHNSON. And I'm here as a citizen, I'm here as a parent. My son is incarcerated. And I am new to this process. It is shocking, it is horrifying, it is scary, and it's somewhere I never dreamed in a million years I would be, or my son would be. But here we are, and I feel compelled to set a few things straight. Number one, thank you. Thank you for listening to the guards when they came in. I was at that meeting and I didn't speak up because I felt like it was for them. Even though their happiness, their being compensated, their kudos directly impacts my son. It directly impacts the way that the prisoners are treated. They need to be respected just as the guards do, and they should be. And my son is one of the few, as I understand it, who has a job. He is very grateful for that job, and I am very grateful for that job because it means for 6 hours out of a day, he gets out of a cell. And Director Frakes is wrong. Not all men are 2 men to a cell. My son has been in there for 16 months and he's 4 men to a cell. 4 men. Randomly assigned, they do not know one another, they are complete strangers, and they are supposed to, quote unquote, get along. I'm amazed. I am amazed at how well they do. I truly am. But someone mentioned that if they didn't need psychiatric care when they came in, they immediately do after they're put into this system. And not all of them are getting it. My son is strong enough to advocate for himself, and he has seen that when he needs meds, even if he has to wait down this long, long list to ever get in, he gets in. And when he needed his meds increased because he had a new cellmate that was driving him freaking crazy, he got back in there and said, I need my meds increased. And he got that. But here's part of the problem with this switching to these 12-hour, these 3 days where they're not out of their cells. It means that 4 days a week he gets his meds at, I believe it's 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm not sure if it's the 4-day or the 3-day, but at any point, part of the time he gets them at 4:30 in the afternoon, even though they're night meds, and part of the time he gets them at 8:30 at night. So if any of you have ever been on medication, especially psychiatric medication, it matters what time of day you take it. It matters how consistently that you are given the medication. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I have no answers for your committee. I'm just here to say you guys matter. And I heard Senator Slama say something to the effect last time I was here that it was not her role as a legislator to tell the executive branch what to do. That scares me. If it's not your role to be involved, then what is your role? What is our system? And again, I admit to you, this is all very new to me. The first time I ever looked at a legislative session was last spring when a judicial matter came up about building the prison. That was the first time. And so I speak from a place of naivete, but I also speak to you from my heart. And I speak to you from a little bit of inside knowledge. And I guess bottom line, there, as you've mentioned, there are so many things that need to be reformed. It is not just pay increases. And I just encourage you to keep looking, keep seeking answers, because the system isn't working. Nobody is being rehabilitated. My son, I don't know when he'll ever qualify for any kind of help because he has such a long sentence. And so many times, it isn't until the last 2 years of their sentence that they get serious about the programming and the rehabilitation to get him back on the street. And I worry daily, what is going to happen to my son over these next 20 years? I worry because I don't even know how to be alive to stay with him as I have promised to him to do. I'm sorry. I guess I just want you to know more than anything, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your efforts. You guys spent long hours. I couldn't stay here the whole night the other night. It was like I was so hungry. I had to get food in my system, and yet you guys were here another 4 or 5 hours after I left. Thank you. And I bless your openness to hear new ideas, whatever they might be. And if there is anything that I personally can do, I would love to be of help in whatever way I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thanks for being here. I know that takes a lot of courage to come and sit in front of people you don't know to talk about policy and your son's circumstance. And so we appreciate hearing from you. And
Thank you.
we're doing what we can, I promise.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and welcome.
I didn't come here today to speak.
You'll have to start with your name and spell it
Oh,
for us.
excuse me. Steve Kinkle, last name spelled Kenkel. And that's a hard act to follow when you're a parent. My son is incarcerated at the penitentiary here in Lincoln. And I came here to observe. He's been in there 2 years, and I couldn't stand back and not say anything after I hear the talks about the program. I live it. My son lives it every day. And the first year he was in there, How do I say this? Signed up for 13 programs because he wanted to get going. He's a busybody. He made a judgmental mistake and he realizes that, he admitted it, and he needs to move forward. To this day, 2 years later, he's had one. Nobody ever told him why he didn't qualify for these programs. He thought it was himself. Here it comes, find out because of the staffing. There's not enough staffing. It's saved for the guys that are just about ready to get out, which you have 800 and some that still ain't out. You have a huge problem here. You guys know that. But one thing I never hear talked about, I'll also have to tell you, I'm an elected official in Iowa. I'm a supervisor. I'm also on the public health, mental health board. And some of the things I see go on, I just shake my head. I mean, an example, right now at the penitentiary, you're bringing in COVID guys that have tested positive for COVID, bringing them into gyms. So now the guys that want to play basketball, like my son, who's one of the few things that he loved, you've taken that away from him. And guess what? COVID, being on the public health board, the virus, the Delta virus can hang in the air for 16 hours. Now you've brought that up and you've circulated it throughout the entire building. You realize that? You've circulated it throughout the entire building. I challenge this board. I appreciate for what you do. I've been in shoes like that. I challenge this board to think outside the box on addressing the staffing. And one of the things you can do that other states are doing, and I've checked into it, Wisconsin's one of them, is on technology. How did we survive COVID and how did employers get through COVID without technology? We had Zoom meetings. People stayed home. They used technology in their computers. How come we don't use that here? I mean, I can't even come visit my son when they're on lockdown. When he was at Douglas County for a few days, I could at least have a video meeting. They don't allow for that here. Can't have a Zoom meeting. I mean, that's part of life today. I try to keep in contact with him once a week. Well, when lockdown, I can't go visit him or I can't even talk to him on the phone. But if you had technology, the inmate could buy a tablet. That's what they do in Wisconsin. The inmate pays for their time. And guess what? When they're locked down for 13 hours like he is now, he could be taking some of the courses that he can't take now. And you don't need all that staff. And everybody's getting the programming. Why is that so difficult? I mean, that's part of today, but it seems like in the correction facility, we have to live back in the Stone Age. This is the way it's always been done. Well, let's try to incorporate some things. And you've said it several times, I don't think raising the salary is going to do this. I don't think it is either. I think it's going to take a combination of a lot of things. But at least if you start incorporating technology, and they set up in Wisconsin that it helped with violations with the staff, guys got ahead on their programming, their well-being, their mental health, because they felt like they were getting ahead. Like my son has shared with me, there's so many guys that can't get the programming, and they're just like falling in a rut because they feel like nobody cares. How come I don't qualify? Mental health is not just about going to a therapy session. Mental health is about doing some of the things you love or being appreciated or taking some of the stress off. You're taking all that away from them when they're locked down. I mean, I could go on about a lot of things, but just focusing in. Programming is not getting done. I wish Director Frakes would have stayed and think outside the box a little bit and some things we can do with our everyday lives. Think of what you do in your everyday life if you didn't have technology, how that would look. And another thing, just to keep in the back of your mind, the number one thing on the inmates that get out that they're not prepared for from the institution is technology, just even using your phone.
Okay. Any questions? I don't see any. I know you were here all day long, because we talked at the beginning of my day. I appreciate your interest in the subject. It is important for us to hear. A lot of times when parents come in or they email us or talk to us as senators, particularly those of us that sit on Judiciary Committee, and I know a number of us have communications with family or with the inmates, it helps us understand and get a different perspective, or perhaps a boots on the ground sort of perspective that we don't get when we're
Right.
asking questions of the director. So we appreciate.
Well, I
you
never
being
thought I would ever be in the chair either. My life changed, my son's changed from a split-second decision, changed his life forever, and it changed ours. And so, but it's been challenging, and it's also been rewarding. I've got to meet a lot of people, and I just see so many things, not one thing, but many things that, if put together right, again, it takes a priority by the majority to get things done. And I think you guys are able to do that. And any way I can help, I'd be willing to meet with anybody here, anytime, give some insight of what's going on.
Okay.
Okay?
We appreciate you being here. Anyone else here to testify on LB 129? So Senator Wishart had a commitment and is not here to close. So that will close our hearing on LB 129. Thank you, committee members, for your being here.
Can we get a quick update on CJI for the after they leave? For those of us
Yeah, I think we
not
can
on-
probably do
not
that.